to the Leo Training Podcast with Joe DeLeo. You'll hear in-depth interviews and tips from world-class athletes, coaches, and industry-leading experts to help you train smarter and improve at what you love to do. Train smarter, get stronger, move better, race faster. Here's your host, Joe DeLeo.
Back with episode 52 of the Leo Training Podcast. And this week's guest is Dr. Kenneth Jay. Dr. Kenneth Jay is the author of several books, including The Cardio Code and Viking Warrior Conditioning, a scientific approach to forging a heart of elastic steel and the applications of the theory behind proper VO2 max training. In this interview, Dr. Kenneth Jay and I sit down and discuss why it's important to include cardiovascular training in your overall training program to balance out the effects that strength training has on the heart. He'll go into in-depth detail and discuss what physical changes occur when you just solely focus on strength training and how that changes the heart, and the benefits of doing cardiovascular exercise and why we want to balance these two components. We will also bust down some myths in this episode, specifically why lifting weights faster is not developing the cardiovascular system, and why having a high heart rate does not necessarily transfer into having a cardiovascular training effect. And this isn't just Kenneth's opinion. He's going to provide scientific evidence and research to show how these changes affect the body and why it is not necessarily cardiovascular work. So, without further ado, let's roll into episode 53 of the Leo Training Podcast. Dr. Kenneth Jay and the Cardio Code. Dr. Kenneth Jay, welcome to the Leo Training Podcast. Thank you for taking the time to come on to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Joe.
Yeah, I'm very excited. We've got a really cool discussion in store for the audience. You've been doing some really exciting work with rowing, and then also in regards to the cardiovascular training in the heart. So before we get into that, I would love for you to take a couple moments, introduce yourself, let the audience know where you're working out of, where you're currently located, and then also your background in the strength and conditioning industry, as well as your PhD work.
Cool. I'll be happy to. Well, my name is Kenneth Jay. I just recently finished my PhD work in musculoskeletal pain and stress. And before that, I've been working as a research assistant at an institute here in Denmark with a background in exercise physiology, specializing in the cardiovascular system. Pretty much for the past 10, 12, probably going on 15 years now, I guess, I've been working with athletes of all levels, ranging from total beginners up to, Olympians, probably specializing a little bit more in the higher end of the spectrum, so the elite levels, but pretty much just trying to spread the word on exercise physiology and the science-based method of training, which is also one of the reasons why I recently, a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called The Cardio Code, trying to debunk a bunch of myths on cardiovascular training. So that was the fast version, or the short version of an introduction.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited because we'll be able to get into a lot of what you just touched on in much greater depth. So let's kind of start things off and talk about kind of your most recent item that you've added to your list of accomplishments, and that was your PhD thesis.
Sure.
So what did that involve? What were you researching, and what was your dissertation on, and how could, I guess, people take that information that you've studied and be able to integrate that or implement it into their training?
Yeah. Well, the area of my PhD is about musculoskeletal pain, chronic musculoskeletal pain, and how it relates to situational stress. and it's done not in performance population, but in the general working population, basically. Um, so the whole topic of musculoskeletal pain is something that I've worked with extensively for the past, well, probably since 2009, and up until this point. I'm quite fascinated about chronic musculoskeletal pain and more specifically the type of pain that arises from no particular injury, but something that kind of creeps up on you. So, for instance, overuse injuries from performing the same monotonous movements over and over again, or any type of, or basically any type of pain that doesn't really have one particular onset, but something that just accumulates, and all of a sudden one day people wake up feeling or having pain in some area of the body. So the more inexplicable pain patterns. And my PhD was about trying to look at a link or a possible interaction between the musculoskeletal pain, the inexplicable musculoskeletal pain, or the pain that creeps up on you, and situational stress. So how feeling stressed with everything that goes on in the hormonal system and how the brain works and stuff like that, to see if there's some sort of interconnectedness between the two. So that was basically the general idea, the general topic of my PhD, and that involved a rather large-scale randomized controlled trial where we tested some methods on people with chronic pain, with this type of chronic pain in the working population, and tried to address it from a physiological standpoint, but also from a behavioral standpoint and from a social standpoint, meaning that the way we experience pain is sometimes also related to the people we are around and the environment and the setting that we're in. So trying to put all those things together and see if we could help these people. So
awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, so definitely taking into account the a systems approach and looking at the whole picture for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So one of the things you touched on there was that the kind of the overuse injuries or going through the same kind of monotonous patterns. You didn't directly say it, but that actually could be very well applied to pretty much most endurance athletes. A runner, a triathlete, a rower, cyclist, they are training at higher volumes, higher intensities, and going through the same type of pattern and in the same postures. Did some of that work, factor into why you wanted to cover that topic?
Well, the thing is that the position that I'm in, the PhD work that I did and got funded for, did not really take in the problems with athletes into account or any particular sports injuries. It's more like everyday type overuse injuries from performing, like, for instance, keyboard athletes, people who sit at a desk for 8 hours a day and constantly type, and they get like a really, really nagging pain in their elbow. They get maybe golfer's elbow or something like that. Okay. So it's more related to those types of pains and in those types of people. So not directly related to any athletes. And this is one of the things that in the beginning, at least in my research career, that I struggled with, is that I spent so much time working with the elite that at least in the beginning it was hard for me to take a step back from that and having to look at the general population, which is a lot larger population. But still, I needed to look at, okay, what are the problems for most people during a normal everyday life, and not necessarily for a triathlete that works out 6 hours a day. I have great interest in that, and one point I would love to go back to looking at that and dig into the research of that. But for my PhD, it was in the general working population. But I guess you can kind of infer some of the results from that and extrapolate it to elite athletes, at least some elite athletes. So any type of monotonous cyclical movement that's not balanced with something else has the potential over time either to cause structural damage or at least ignite a pain pattern, which is something that is very often seen in, for instance, road cyclists or swimmers, for that matter. The swimmer is actually a nice example of that. I spent the better part of 10 years working with the Danish national swimming team. And the typical injury for a swimmer is, of course, shoulder pain and direct shoulder injuries. But even when there are no structural damage, other than maybe inflammation and stuff like that, even when that's taken care of, some of these, or a lot of them, actually has what would be termed chronic shoulder pain, and that usually comes from the excessive amounts of shoulder rotation. So yes, there is definitely some type of overlap between the two.
Very cool. Awesome. So were there any, I guess first part is, what were the results of your thesis study, or what are some takeaways that general population could learn and potentially use as actionable steps from your work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, basically, what I did was that I looked at pain in musculoskeletal pain and the rehabilitation of that from I guess you could say more neurological perspective instead of looking at it biomechanically. A bunch of studies have looked at monotonous repetition work from a biomechanical standpoint in terms of looking at ergonomics and basic postures and the implements that are being used, for instance, the keyboard or whatever type of work it might be. So we've all seen these pads that you can get to rest your hands on when you're using a mouse on a computer, right? That would be like an ergonomic tool aimed at relieving pain. But my approach was more, yes, that's important, but it was more based on an idea or a theory that when pain is the output from the brain, we have to, at least from one perspective, try to change the perception of that pain, and in that way try to reduce it. So we used some very, very basic movements, not exercising per se, but more like you could call it joint mobility exercises as a physiological component of it. And then we added what's called cognitive behavioral therapy on top of that. So cognitive meaning understanding what is going on, and behavioral applying coping strategies to the experiences. So we added that on top of it. And then we added an element of trying to worked on decreasing pain catastrophizing with these people, because what usually happens when people have been experiencing pain for a very long time, and it's something that's probably induced by their activities during everyday life, for instance, their work, they can often catastrophize their pain in such a way that their brain kind of goes, I have to work. This is a job that I have, and it's the job that's causing my pain. And then the brain can kind of go haywire, meaning like, okay, I can't quit my job, and that means my pain is going to get worse because I will still be exposing myself to this. And then the pain pain will get worse. And then because they start to think that, they will start to bring those consequences into other aspects. They may start to think, okay, if my pain in my shoulder gets worse, then I can't throw a ball, or then I can't continue to practice playing the guitar or whatever. So all of a sudden it takes over other parts of recreational activities, or just basically diminishing quality of life. So we worked a lot on that aspect as well. And that was then compared to another group of equally chronic pain workers, and then they were just following like basic standardized physical therapy programming, and then we compared the two after a 10-week training intervention with those elements. So
awesome, very cool, very cool. That sounds like a very long-term, intensive PhD project that you were thesis that you were doing.
Yeah. With everything, it's been about 3 years. So.
Oh man! Well, congratulations. I know that's a lot of time.
Yep.
Very cool. So, is there anything else that you want to touch on regarding your PhD thesis before we kind of shift gears to a different topic?
No, not really. If there is a bunch of I published a bunch of articles on that, so it's for those who might be listening that are interested in it. They can just do a quick search on my name on PubMed, and then all these articles will show up. But basically, what it basically tells you is that doing combined joint trying to improve not just ranges of motion, but ranges, movement abilities in different ranges that are normally being used during the working day, and combining that with education and having coping strategies works really, really well at decreasing this kind of thing. So that was the outcome of it anyway.
Sorry, do you mind just repeating that, because the video got really choppy? I'm going to actually turn my video off.
Yeah, I'll turn mine off as well here. All right. All right.
There we go.
Okay, you can still hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, like I said, people who are interested in reading more about this research, a lot of it has been published already, and it's easily accessible on PubMed. Just do a search of my name, and then all the articles will show up. But basically, the outcome of my PhD project was that if you're experiencing this type of pain from monotonous repetition work, a viable solution to that is incorporating precise dynamic joint mobility into it. So other ranges of motions are also addressed in the painful body parts, and combining that with cognitive strategies, meaning education about understanding what is going on inside the body and why the body is responding with a pain output that increases the effect of the training. So that's basically the outcome of my PhD.
Excellent. That's great. That's great practical advice that people can take and go home and implement right away.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so shifting gears.
Yep.
Let's talk about the cardio code. So both the book and then also the seminar that you're putting on. So what? I guess. Well, actually, let's start at the beginning. So, what was the impetus, or what led you to want to write the book, and then what is the book about?
All right. Well, the thing is that a couple of years ago, I was seeing a lot of posts, and these posts are still happening on Facebook, by the way. But I was noticing a lot of posts about cardiovascular training, and that you can develop your cardiovascular system or do your cardio with by lifting weights, you just have to lift them faster. So a bunch of very inspirational pictures with text were floating around saying that, what do you do for cardio? I lift weights faster and all of this stuff. And basically that, well, to be blunt, it really, really pissed me off. Because with a background in exercise physiology, with a specialty in cardiovascular function and cardiovascular exercise, such statements are utter BS. That cannot be expressed enough and more clearly. It is tremendously wrong to say something like that, because what happens with adaptations during weight training is very, very different from what happens doing the typical cardiovascular exercises like running, rowing, biking, skiing, and the like. So basically, it was I got pissed off by a Facebook post or 10 or 100 Facebook posts, and that led me to my computer and say, I'm going to write a book about this.
Awesome.
So that was what happened. So the interesting thing is that I spent about a week writing that book, and that was how mad I was. So I cranked out the book in about a week.
Wow, that's very impressive. So you wrote that entire book in a week or under?
Yeah, the rough draft of it.
Right.
And then of course there was all the post production and all that stuff, editing, but I had the material and the manuscript there in about a week or so.
Wow! So you were struck by inspiration as well as driven right there.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, if you can call if you can call anger inspiration, then I guess you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about the book. So what are some of you covered one just now in terms of clearing up any confusion regarding myths of cardiovascular training. But what are some of the other principles that would be outlined and covered in the book?
Well, basically, and this is so typical of me because I like, instead of just taking like 100 myths of the fitness industry, because and that could quite easily have been done, taking 100 of them. I kind of like to take just one key one and really try to debunk it into the very, very small details of it, and give a thorough background on why such a statement would be wrong. So basically, what the entire book is about is about why any type of weight training is not cardiovascular training. And I start the book by pretty much explaining all the underlying physiology that determines, or that pretty much says that these things are vastly different. And then I go into the next section of the book pretty much showing a bunch of research that backs up the theoretical physiology of it. And then the third section of the book is pretty much how you can then train your cardiovascular system most efficiently. So it is it all has offset in this one thing about weight training is not cardio. And I try to do my very best at debunking the myths of basically the idea of elevating your heart rate. Many people believe that just by having a high heart rate, you are doing cardio, or you're training cardio, you're training the cardiovascular system. But that is a very flawed way of thinking, and it is surprising that not more trainers in the fitness industry as it is today know these things. There are plenty of articles out there that says that, okay, heart rate is high, then it's great for the cardiovascular system. But that's not only wrong, it's also a problem, because most people will then think if they lift a lot of weights and they just do it fast or do circuit training or CrossFit with a lot of weightlifting in it, and they elevate their heart rate really, really high, then it's going to have all the positive effects on the heart. But unfortunately, the effects of weightlifting, no matter how you do it, on the heart, can be quite severe and quite problematic. Weightlifting and weight training has many tremendous benefits for the musculoskeletal system, but for the cardiovascular system, the benefits are not that great. They can actually be quite problematic. So that's basically also what I'm trying to make trainers understand whenever they attend my courses, is that you are providing your clients with a disservice. You're not doing them any good if you're only pushing weight training exercises and calling that cardio just because you elevate your heart rate. You may even end up actually decreasing their health because of it. So it has quite severe consequences, and that's what I'm trying to make the fitness world understand with my book and my courses.
Awesome. No, I think that's so important. The other podcast episode that I just published this week, I had Andrew Reed on, and he kind of touched on something very, very similar. And I think it's right in line. So just correct me if I'm inaccurate here. But one of the things he said is that, when you're doing weight training and only weight training, even though you may be elevating the heart rate, you're actually increasing the density of the tissue of the hearts. But the way that the heart is actually structured is that it doesn't grow outward, so the chambers actually are able to hold less volume of blood. That's accurate, correct?
Yes, that is very accurate, and I think Andrew has been reading my book. He has been reading my book.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Well, I know Andrew. I really, really like him, and we talk about these things and have past quite a bit. So he's absolutely correct when he if he said that on your podcast. That is indeed the major issue with weight training, is that it increases the thickness of the heart wall. And well, basically it makes the heart muscle grow in thickness. And then most people, when they hear that, they kind of go, but isn't a thicker muscle a stronger muscle? And because we normally relate it to our the muscles we have in our arms and legs and all of that, and we want bigger, thicker muscles there, right? But the problem is with the heart is that it grows, just like you said, it grows inward. And what also happens is that it increases whenever the heart muscle is stimulated to grow thicker that way and not stimulated to expand. It actually also increases its content of collagen, so the connective tissue of the heart, which decreases something called compliance, or how easily it's stretched. So not only are you going to end up with a thicker muscle, but it's also going to be stiffer. And that's really problematic, because stiffness of the heart increases blood pressure. And it increases the ejection pressure when the heart ejects blood into the circulatory system, and that means that there has to be a whole lot of the problem there is that there should be a lot of then vasodilation, meaning all the blood vessels in your body should dilate, so there is more room for all this blood. But the problem is that during strength training, all the vessels, they're constricted. So the same adaptations happen in the blood vessels as well. That means that you have artery stiffness as well. So the arteries will not be pliable, but they will be stiff. And that has severe consequences in terms of buildup of plaque on the inside of the artery walls. And once we get to that point, blood clots, strokes, and other cardiovascular diseases are not that far off. And at the same time, once the heart has grown in thickness, there is really no way of undoing that. So once you've created these adaptations to your heart, those are pretty much the adaptations that you're going to have to live with, because you can't detrain your heart. You can't make it smaller again. So there are quite severe consequences to only focusing on lifting weights and neglecting cardiovascular training or endurance training.
Absolutely. Now, but you could also say, sort of on the flip side of that, like, so for example, I know I've read Matthew Pinsent and Steve Redgrave's autobiographies, and one of the things that they talk about in there is that from doing years of cardiovascular endurance training as high level elite rowers, that their heart has actually gotten bigger. And so for them, they might kind of feel on the opposite end of the spectrum. So instead of the density of the heart's actually grown in size. So for them, they actually need to, or any elite level type endurance athlete, they're going to need to maintain some sort of cardiovascular training, because the pump aspect of the heart, it's become so efficient. So if you kind of just stop cold turkey, that's also not very healthy for the body.
Yeah, but it only happens probably. There's only been less than 10 reported cases of such a thing happening ever, which is nothing compared to how many elite athletes actually undergo this cardiovascular training. So what you're describing there is the completely opposite. What normally happens, or what can happen it happens in Tour de France bike riders the most, and it's not very common. It's like less than 10 occurrences within the last 100 years or something like that. In that regard, and that's when the heart has been stretched too much, so it holds too much blood and does not have enough wall thickness of the heart. That's the entire, and that's an entirely different situation. It happens very infrequently, and it's pretty much only limited to those who are training at such a level that they can ride in the Tour de France. It doesn't happen to the average Joe in the gym. However, the heart wall thickness, it happens to all of us that attend the gym on a regular basis. So the problem is not the what you're describing. The problem is that we don't pay enough attention to what happens to all of us. The thing is that, and this is the reason why I like rowing so much, is that it has an element of both strength training and cardiovascular training in it. So when you look at heart morphology on rowers and you compare it to other endurance athletes, for instance, the cyclists or the marathon runners, you will actually see that they have equal chamber size, meaning that the amount of blood that they can hold in the left ventricle is the same, but the rowers will have slightly increased wall thickness. So, and what that actually translates to is that what seems to be the most important factor here is that it's the ratio between the cavity size of the left ventricle, meaning how much blood that fits into it, related to the thickness of the wall. So it's the ratio between those two that has to be maintained. So if you only overexpand the chamber size or the cavity size, and the wall thickness decreases relatively to that increase, yes, that can pose a problem if you're a Tour de France bike rider. And again, if you switch the ratio in the different direction, meaning that the chamber or cavity size shrinks or decreases because the wall thickness increase, then that's going to be a problem for pretty much everyone at some point. At least if it's enough to At least if it's in people who strength train a lot and never do any cardiovascular training. So we have to pay attention to the finer details, and we have to look at, it's probably not so much the absolute values in cavity size or wall thickness, but it's more related to the ratio between them. That's important. And again, that's why I like rowing, because rowers build that ideal ratio between wall thickness and chamber size. There has never been a reported issue with rowers who have retired that have experienced either what you were describing or experienced the negative effects of the strength training component. Rowers have the healthiest hearts by far. So,
when you say healthiest hearts, you mean out of like sort of all endurance athletes?
Yeah, well, all of them. They pretty much have the healthiest hearts. You name it, and I will always bet on the rower to have the more healthy heart. Basically, because the development of the heart and the heart morphology, it changes, but it changes relative to each other. So this optimal ratio between structure and volume, internal volume, is the most favorable one. This is something that there are researchers here at the University of Copenhagen and at the big hospital in Copenhagen, they're looking at, and they see the same things. They see that the rower's heart is by far the healthiest heart, even if we compare it to the marathon runner, or we compare it to the road cyclist, or whatever, the cross country skier. The rower has the healthiest heart.
And do you attribute that to exactly what you said, the balance between developing the size as well as having that kind of the ideal thickness, I guess, of the chamber?
Yeah. That seems to be a major component of why that is. But basically, it can be boiled down to that rowing is a very nice combination of both strength training and cardiovascular training. So it does both. Most people just think that's cardio, but it actually is, depending on who you ask and who you read. But it's probably around 20 to 30% strength training and 70 to 80% cardiovascular training. So there is a nice balance in the stimulus that you get. And during rowing, you can easily end up using forces close to, even during sprint rowing, you will use 100% of your muscle capacity in terms of generating force. But during like a 2,000 meter row, you will average about 60 to 70, 75, maybe 75% of your maximal force production capability during rowing. And that is that's strength training at the same time as you're doing cardiovascular training, because at the same time your cardiovascular system and your oxygen uptake will be maximal. So we have this unique combination of the two, and not just a primary focus on one, and that is a big deal.
Wow, this is awesome. Okay, so I got my next two questions for you. So first one is, so if we were working with, say, general population, given all the information that we've covered up until this point, what would be sort of some optimal, a GPP type plan for a general population individual to do, taking into consideration, all the time that we're sitting at a desk now, so making sure we're addressing strength and cardiovascular.
Well, basically, I would. I get this question all the time during my seminars, and the thing is, it's very hard to give any specific guidelines, because if there's a person coming in who has a really, really bad cardiovascular system. He has high blood pressure and really, really low oxygen uptake, and everything is just really, really bad. Then that person shouldn't do any strength training. He should only do cardiovascular training. He should only row or run or bike or ski. On the other end, if someone comes in that was a collegiate level, I don't know, rower or cyclist or whatever, but someone who's been very active cardiovascularly for many, many years and is not overweight or anything, and has a well-functioning cardiovascular system, then the focus, of course, could quite easily fall more on strength training and weightlifting type activities. So it depends on who it is. But in general, and my general advice is, not knowing anything about the people who are about to undergo some training, is that people should at least balance the two systems 50-50. So if you spend 1 hour doing strength training, you should also spend 1 hour doing cardiovascular activities, just to balance it out. And then you need further tests done in order to know for sure if you should increase one over the other from a health perspective. In my case, for instance, 80% of my training time goes into cardiovascular training, and only 20% goes into strength training. So,
very cool. Now, when you're spending that 80% of your time, your training time doing cardiovascular training, do you vary the intensity of those sessions up, or are you doing, quote unquote, like steady state, lower intensity, pure aerobic work? Or are you doing higher intensity work, or is it a blend?
Well, it's always going to be a blend, because once you've decided that, here's the thing: it's not the energy system that determines if an activity is cardiovascular or not. Because you can address all energy systems in a cardiovascular workout. So you need to have the proper activity down first. And what I usually say is that you can run, you can row, you can cycle or bike, you can ski, or you can hop on a Versa climber, or any other similar activities to those. So if you live in an area where you can, and you like to skate, so there can be like ice skating, that's like running on ice. But those types of activities, those are cardiovascular. And then from there, we need to look at, okay, so what kind of deficits are we looking at? Is there a deficit in anaerobic production training, maximal velocity? Is there a deficit in the ability to tolerate high levels of lactate and low pH levels in the muscles and in the blood? Or is there a deficit in oxygen uptake or in oxygen uptake capacity? So that's why I'm such a big fan of testing things, because it eliminates guessing. Most people just guess, or they don't even guess. They just gravitate towards the activities that they enjoy the most or hate the least. And for most people, that would be, okay, let's do some higher intensity, shorter duration sprint work if we're going to do cardio. But these people are probably the ones that need to work on oxygen uptake capacity the most, meaning being able to go on for a prolonged period of time. So from my perspective, it's going to be a mix, but depending on your current abilities, those are going to be the determining factors on which end of the spectrum you're going to be focusing your training on. If you're doing this primarily for a health perspective, but also for long-term development.
Awesome. Okay, so let me circle back, because I almost forgot to ask my second part of that question. So we discussed general population. So if you were working with either a university or elite level type rower,
mm-hmm.
what would be some of the things that you would want to take into consideration when you're looking for, helping to put together a training program and addressing the cardiovascular and the strength needs to making sure that they have that sort of that optimum balance in regards to the heart.
Well, this is a huge part of what I do at my seminars and at my workshop and courses, is that I teach people how to test and evaluate and how to interpret the results of those tests. And there are several really, really good tests out there that can give you indications of current training status. And those I always suggest should pretty much be done with everyone, from the higher level athlete to the pretty much the beginner who's just getting used to exercising, because only through proper testing and actually getting measurable numbers and indicators, we will know the best plan of attack. There's one thing that I hate in the fitness industry, and that's the amount of guessing that's out there, and the amount of just one program, one method fits all, because that's definitely not the case. And it's even harder to do when we're talking about the cardiovascular system. So basically, I would always assess maximum oxygen uptake, and that can be done indirectly. There is a very, very high correlation between your performance on a 2,000 meter row, the average power output you have on a 2,000 meter row, and your maximum oxygen uptake. So that will be one of the first things that, as soon as people have gotten used to being on the rower and have been introduced to it, this familiarization period has been completed, then I have people test a 2K row, and that will give me a quite accurate number on their maximum oxygen uptake. And then from there, I correlate that with what are normal values, or I compare it with normative values. So I figure out, is this person just average? Is he or she below average or above average? Or can we even compare this person to the lower end of the elite scale? So from doing something like that, you get a strong indication of where people should put in some work. And then, of course, there's also the variable of what do people want from the training, because there's usually a huge difference in what people need and what people want. They usually
right.
they usually need something that's completely different from what they want, and that's of course also a problem and a barrier that needs to be addressed.
Awesome. This is great stuff. Well, I know I'm going to be closely watching your website for the next seminar that's going to be in the States for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited because I really think that you're doing some fantastic stuff, and I really can appreciate the taking the time to assess and how much more information you're learning up front. It just allows you to put together a much more thorough and comprehensive training program.
Absolutely, and again, it eliminates guesswork, or it minimizes guesswork. Most people in the fitness industry today, they guess that when they test someone's strength in whatever exercise, and then they say, okay, to improve this, you need to spend this much time or this many lifts at 70% of that 1 RM, and then you increase that to 75%, and then you jump up to 85%, and then you back off, and then you retest. That's what you need. See, all of that is just guesswork. It's not based on anything other than what have other people done previously. But the problem is it's not individualized enough, and there are no two people who are exactly the same. So the one size fits all model in terms of any type of training to any type of activity, it just doesn't hold up. There are, of course, similarities and things that everybody should do at one point, but exactly how to do it and how to put things together, and especially how much time should be dedicated in each of these areas, are going to be so individual. So I think there should be a lot more testing, and then of course the people who do the testing should also know how to interpret the tests. That's another thing that's problematic, is that a lot of trainers out there are really fond of testing, but they have absolutely no idea on how to interpret those results. So first step is to get in the testing mindset, and the second step is then to learn how to interpret the results of those tests.
Yeah, that's so important, and like I said before, that's why in the future I will be looking forward to attending your seminar and learning more.
Cool.
Now, do you recommend, or do you do different tests to assess, obviously for the cardiovascular system, but would you have an individual do different tests to evaluate their strength, or do you sort of factor that in, that it comes with the rowing?
Well, see, that's again the interesting thing, is that it's once you get people on the rower, it becomes really, really clear, because it has those that element of strength built in there, and power development. It will be quite easy to see if there is a strength, if the deficit is strength, or if the deficit is primarily on the cardiovascular system. The thing is with rowing particularly, is that strength in the gym with typical exercises like the deadlift and leg presses and squats and all of these things, they don't really correlate with rowing performance. So you can have people who are tremendously strong in those gym lifts, but they can't generate the same level of force per stroke on the rower, which is kind of weird, because rowing is not that complicated, at least not on an inboard rower.
Right.
But there is such a high level of specificity to it, and even though if it's the row is quite simple, it involves a high degree of making, well, basically the lower body and the upper body work together in the right sequence. And I guess you could argue that, for instance, a deadlift does that as well, but it just doesn't transfer all that great into it. So you can't just evaluate strength in the gym. You actually have to evaluate strength on the rower, if you need proper indications of what is exactly needed. And that can be done as well. There are many ways to test strength on a rowing ergometer. It's not just for cardiovascular testing. You can test maximal force output on a rower as well.
Right, watts. Yeah, looking at the watts.
Well, that's power. That's not force, but it has.
Oh, you're talking about the force curve. Sorry.
Yeah, you can actually get a very accurate reading of how much force you're putting into the machine for each stroke, and force is interesting to look at least from a strength perspective. But again, it doesn't have to be all that complicated. And especially not for the general population. People will really get a long way towards their goals and towards improving their health if they would just add some type of cardiovascular training into their training regime. And I'm not talking about a cardio class where you lift weights fast or you just get your heart rate up. It has to be running, rowing, Viking skiing, or attending a Versa climber class, or having one. The activities like that are real cardiovascular activities. And if people would just add that and spend an equal amount of time on that, they would see tremendous changes in their health, but also in their looks, because there's nothing like cardiovascular activities to actually burn calories. That's another issue that I didn't address in my book, but people have this idea that strength training burns more calories than running or rowing can do, but that's just so incredibly wrong. There is nothing in the physiology that would back up such a statement, and every time it's measured, the cardiovascular activities burns way more calories because the power output is higher. You cannot generate and sustain the power outputs of a rower. You cannot do that during weight training. So based on basic physics, you cannot burn that many calories during weight training. So the whole thing about burning 1,000 or 1,200 calories by doing some type of circuit training, weight training class, it's just ridiculously wrong. It cannot be done. Most people overestimate how many calories they burn. A typical woman, when she goes into the gym and strength trains hard for an hour, she will probably burn 300 calories. And a guy will probably, if he's not resting, and he's actually spending time lifting, he will probably burn maybe 500 calories. But that's far away from what is being advertised out there. And it's also far away from if people wear a heart rate monitor and they go into the gym and they get a reading saying that, oh, okay, you burned 1,000 calories doing this work in the gym. This is one of the fallacies that's out there, that you cannot use heart rate as a gauge for your cardiovascular system, and you cannot use it as a gauge for how many calories you've burned. So I guess that's the next book.
Yeah, or at least version 2 for sure of the cardio code. No, that's great. I really appreciate you addressing some of those myths and common points of confusion in marketing and advertising in the health and fitness industry. So what would you recommend? I mean, obviously, it has to be very individualized, but let's use me for example. So if I were to, I'm doing, training for the SFG level 2 in 2017. So I'm doing, at least 3 to 4 strength training sessions a week. And then the cardiovascular. So on the ergometer, I'm doing, 45 to 60 minutes, but lower intensity, wearing a heart rate monitor, usually, sub 150, I would say heart rate. I'm 31. So I'm making sure that I'm following that. What would be some advice that you would give me?
Well, again, my advice would be, okay, if you're accustomed to, at least from the cardiovascular perspective, if you're accustomed to being on the rowing ergometer, then you should definitely test, because that is the one way to figure out, do you need more here to balance things out, or are you good? So as I always recommend that complete beginners, they spend about 6 weeks doing the cardiovascular activity of their choice. I prefer rowing because it has very, very few drawbacks and many, many really, really great benefits. But if people don't like to row for some reason and they want to run instead, that's fine. Or they want to they want to use an assault bike or the Airdyne. That's totally cool. But regardless of what they choose to do, there should always be like a 6-week break-in period where they just, for the rowing example, is that they row 3 to 4 times a week, just try to complete 5K. And and I don't even care about how fast they do it. They should just complete it. So once they've done 4 times a week for 6 weeks, they will have more than 12,000 repetitions on the rower, meaning that they will have pulled that handle more than 12,000 times. So at that point, they will have cleared out all the bugs in their, or most of the bugs in their technique, because the body is great at adjusting itself. Of course, they won't look anything like a high level or even an Olympic level rower, but it will be good enough for them to progress. And at that time, they've gotten accustomed to operating the machine and all of these things. And then from there, the next step is to test a 2K to see how fast you can row 2,000 meters. And from there, you will get, and that requires a bit of interpretation based on other measurements and normative values. But that number you get will give you an indication of your cardiovascular system status. Meaning, do you need more, or are you good? Depending on goals, but also health status. So that would be my advice to you if it's you. It's that, okay, get on the rower and prepare to suffer tremendously for 6 or 8 minutes or so, right? So this is one of the things I spend a lot of time talking about at my courses, is that rowing an all-out 2K is tremendously painful. It's also it is tremendously painful, and just getting used to that pain is a big deal. But again, the knowledge that you gain from it will go a really, really long way in terms of determining what you should focus on.
Awesome. All right. Well, you pulled my leg. I'll make sure that I get that done. And do that, and then I'll send you an email and let you know how that goes.
Sure, absolutely.
Very cool. Very cool. This is great stuff. So make sure we're going through all the topics. I think we touched on everything that we had down here. Is there anything that you want to, speak about in greater depth? Let people know about your book. I mean, obviously I'll include it in the show notes or the seminar, so they can learn a little bit more about it and check it out if they're interested.
Yeah, well, basically just for anyone listening, if they feel like it, check out my website. It's cardiocode.dk. It's a Danish domain, but the website is in English. And it contains some info, and it contains startup programs on how to get started. It has videos and stuff like that. So go check that one out, and check out upcoming courses as well. The next one is actually in 2 weeks, but it's here in Denmark. So I don't know how many of you are interested in flying over and visiting a very windy and wet and cold Denmark. But there will be more courses added as soon as we get into January, February. There will be more courses in the States posted on the website. And then you can always hook me up on Facebook. That's awesome. A good way of getting in touch with me as well.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to include links to all those in the show notes.
Yeah, very cool.
Awesome. Are you ready to move into the rapid fire portion?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. All right. So given your all your life experience and your current level of knowledge, what advice would you give yourself 15 years ago?
Do more cardio training, real cardio training. Don't neglect the running 3 or 4 times a week, or getting on a rower, or play a sport that involves a lot of cardiovascular work. That is the biggest thing.
Okay. And just to summarize, cardiovascular activities would include, like you said, running, rowing, cycling, those types.
Skiing, stuff like that. But also sports, for instance, like playing soccer, or that's a sport that involves a lot of rowing. And here in Europe, a sport that's really popular is called team handball. It's not like the handball that you guys have in the States. It's much more aggressive, and it's also fun to look at, and that also has a high amount of running involved. So any type of sport that has those activities involved as well, those will be beneficial, of course.
Excellent.
So I should have done more of those.
Very cool. What is your favorite strength training exercise if you had to pick one?
Only one?
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I haven't even thought about that. My favorite strength training exercise, bicep curls, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay. How has your training changed today compared to 15 years ago?
Oh, tremendously. 15 years ago, I was, 15 years ago, that was beginning 2000. That was very much dominated by typical bodybuilding type stuff, bodybuilding routines. I really like bodybuilding and training for the aesthetic look, but I hardly do any of that anymore. Pretty much, I only gravitate towards the bodybuilding when it's Friday night and I'm getting ready to go out in town to pump up. Uh,
Nice.
but I don't do a whole lot of that type of stuff, and I definitely don't do the amount of the amount of different exercises that bodybuilders would do. I can still go strength train or bodybuild with using like old school strategies, like Vince Giroda principles. I really really love that, but I could never do like 30 sets of quadriceps or leg exercises or something like that. I could never ever do that. So, but I used to. I used to, and that's probably the biggest change from 15 years ago.
Right on. Right on. Have you ever
Hello?
I'm still here. I'm here.
Oh, okay, good, good.
Have you ever had an injury? And if you have, how did that injury affect your training?
Well, I've had many injuries, but I've hardly had injuries that was related to strength training or stuff that you do at the gym. I've pulled muscles and stuff like that, but it's been impact injuries or injuries that occurred from contact with other people, not so much injuries from lifting a barbell wrong or having an accident happen in the gym. That has hardly ever happened. I can't really remember a time when it did. But in terms of impact injuries from sports and all that, I've had groin tears and I've had hamstring tears and I even tore my pec during an arm wrestling competition during the Danish Championships. But that's all impact injuries and mediated because there was another external factor affecting me. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, that sounds intense, man. Tearing your pec during an arm wrestling competition. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh. Oof.
yeah, yeah. That was painful. That was not a memorable moment at all. So,
Oh yeah, I can imagine
but
that.
stuff happens. Stuff
Yeah.
happens. I would much rather have those things happen than not participating in those activities where there's a chance you can get injured. So anytime you step into the ring on the field or whatever it is that you choose to do, there's an element of not necessarily danger, but risk involved, and I would much rather take that risk and go do the activity than stay away from it and try to bypass the risk, because there's risk in everything. We can't take life so seriously because we're not going to get out alive anyway.
That's right. We got to live. We have to live. Very cool. What's one thing that junior athletes, so like the high school 14 to 18 age bracket, should be doing more of to complement their training and their health?
Complement training and health. They should in the junior level, they shouldn't specialize. They should explore. They should have more variability in the types of activities that they do. Probably at junior level, they're probably getting drawn towards a particular sport, and that can be okay. But they shouldn't only do one sport exclusively. I worked a lot with athletic development in youngsters over the years, and written up like developmental programs in terms of athletic development, in terms of different sports. And one of the things we're constantly seeing is that the more you explore movement in those critical years of huge high adaptation. So whenever a boy or a girl hits about 6, 7, 8 years old, and all the way up until, at least for a boy, 16, and probably a girl 14, 15, that's an open window of opportunity to really gain some skills that doesn't necessarily look like they can be transferred into whatever sport that they're interested in, but for long-term health, it will be tremendously beneficial. In my own case, and this is what I'm trying to do with my kids, is that, and this is one of the things that I really think is valuable to everyone, is the exploration of different types of martial arts. I'm particularly fond of types of grappling, but also learning how to punch and learning how to kick and jump and roll and all of these things. And not because they have to turn out to be martial artists, but they learn movements, they develop movement strategies and motor control that's really hard to learn when you get older. So they should at least do one other activity that's totally different from whatever sport that they're being drawn to. I would love to see that young kids who want to play football or baseball, they attend a weekly ballet class or something like that. That would benefit them tremendously.
Awesome. That's great advice. Great advice. What's your best tip to improve recovery post-training session?
Post-training session, best tip, that's easy. Make sure you get a lot of carbs. Just have a drinkable solution of fast-acting carbs like glucose drinks ready. Eat a bag of marshmallows, or just something that replenishes glycogen stores really, really rapidly after an intense training session. That is so important for recovery. If we're talking like the immediate time after you finish. But other than that, sleeping is a big deal. Many people are talking about sleep as something to increase the amount of for recovery. That's important too. But the sustenance part, in terms of replenishing glycogen stores, electrolyte balance, fluid levels, is tremendously important, and probably the most important thing that you can do when you finish your training session.
Awesome. What is your favorite meal?
Favorite meal? That's probably the Danish national dish, which is, well, you can basically just imagine like a really, really extremely thick slice of bacon. Probably, what would that be? I don't know what that would be in inches, but like your normal regular size of bacon, just like maybe 6 or 8 times as thick as that. And then it's fried on the pan. And then you get like fresh new Danish potatoes with it, and a parsley sauce on top of it. That's like a Danish traditional dish. I can send you a picture of it that you can include in the thing so people can see what it looks like.
Wow, that sounds amazing, man.
It's really, really good, and it's cheap. And there are so many places here in Denmark where you can that have all you can eat of that. So that's heaven.
That's awesome. Awesome. Yeah, you're making me hungry right now. What's one book that everyone should read?
Oh, wow. In terms of training, or does the topic matter? Because there
Anything.
are so many great. anything. Oh, I have so many. A Brief History of Time is probably a good one to start out with. It is not training related, but it is definitely related to our existence here on Earth. What else is there? Right now, I'm reading for probably the 10th time. I'm reading a book on personal protection and the ability to recognize patterns in what you see in everyday life. It's a book called The Gift of Fear, written by Gavin de Becker. It is such an awesome book that really opens your mind to all the signals that are out there and that you have to pay attention to in terms of personal protection and all of these things. So that's definitely also a favorite book. Training wise, that's a hard one because training knowledge is so scientific, at least to me it is, and I can't see why it shouldn't be to everyone. So I have a hard time picking out a book that everyone should read on training. Basically, I say that if you're interested in training, you can't go wrong with a university level textbook on basic physiology, because if everybody read that and tried to understand it, we would eliminate so many fallacies in the fitness industry. So pretty much any university level textbook on the physiology of the body would be beneficial. So those are at least some examples.
Excellent. Awesome. Okay. Final question. Who have you studied or do you continue to study in your career to learn and to get better?
Also in terms of fitness training or in general?
Wide open. Yeah, wide open.
Wide open. People like if I were to have a do-over on my education and everything that I did, I would probably have become a physicist, I think. So everything that's involved in cosmology. So I like Stephen Hawking a lot, and pretty much read everything he writes. I'm not sure I understand any of it, but I read it. A physicist like Richard Feynman, I really like in that arena. So those are the people that I follow and try to learn from. Again, I have a huge interest in personal protection and all of that, and understanding the behavior of human beings, and especially in terms of violence. So there's a person out there, his name is Tony Blauer. He's the creator of the SPEAR system. He has redefined the way we should think about self-defense and stuff like that. So you can look him up on online and hook him up on Facebook. He's a tremendous resource on the behavior that goes with escalation and de-escalations of forceful encounters. So he's a guy that I turn to in that aspect. Let's see, who else? I don't know. Those are probably some of the major players. It's hard for me to pick just one. It's got to be at least one for each kind of interesting topic, I think.
Sure.
There is a psychologist. He pretty much redefined psychology and understanding the brain and happiness and these things. His name is Martin Seligman, and he's considered the founding father of positive psychology. I really like a person like that, and there are so many others. There is a guy. He's a skepticist. He writes for Scientific American, and he's the editor of Skeptic magazine as well. And he actually also co-founded the Ram race. I don't know if you're familiar with that. The race across America.
Oh wow!
On bike. Yeah, so he co-founded that and competed in it, I think 3 or 4 times. His name is Michael Shermer. He's a skepticist. He's a skeptic, and he has done a lot of work. He's also a historian, and he specialized, or he wrote his thesis on the Holocaust denial, which is also kind of interesting. But he's taking this route of teaching how to be skeptic and how to think like a scientist. So I really like him. I really like him because pretty much everything that he's written is a lesson in how to debunk weird and mysterious claims. And it's something I've learned a tremendous amount of valuable tools from him in order to debunk fallacies. So he's definitely a person to look up. And then of course there's the evolutionary biologist, the Stanford professor Robert Sapolsky, which I think is just a tremendous inspiration in terms of understanding neurobiology and human development. And then there are the people that I'm currently working with in Florida at the Carrick Institute and the Plasticity Brain Centers, and the head of the Carrick Institute, Dr. Carrick, a brilliant mind that I hope that I can only, if I can get to the point where I understand 5% of what he understands and how he puts things together in terms of human function and brain function, then I'll be happy. So he's an inspiration. He's also one of the people that I look up to.
Awesome, man. That's quite the list. That's great stuff. So I'll be sure to try to link as best as I can to the people you mentioned and include those in the show notes for everybody to check out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Kenneth, this has been a real treat. Thank you so much again for taking the time to come on. I know you're super busy and stuff and been traveling a lot recently.
Well, my pleasure, Joe.
Awesome. So just let me stop the recording and I'll give you a proper goodbye offline.
All right, cool.
Thanks for tuning in and listening to this brand new episode of the Leo Training Podcast. If you enjoyed this content, please take a moment of your time, head on over to iTunes and drop in a 5-star review, or share it on your favorite social media network such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram. Be sure to tune in next week for another brand new episode when I interview Master Strong First instructor and creator of Flexible Steel, John Engum.
Thanks for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. Subscribe and get even more expert training tips at www.leotraining.io.